How we doing? Good morning. IB countdown to kickoff up and running. Vince was starting to get some ire in the YouTube chat as we sat here getting ready. I was prepared to wait about 30 to 45 more seconds.
That's
And
fair.
then Vince jumped in behind the scenes and we are ready to go. I tell you what I did. I rebooted my computer. I've started doing preemptive computer reboots so we don't get last minute stuff, man. It's
Probably
like,
smart.
I know. Well, here we are. We are ready to go on a not so nice looking Saturday morning in
No
South
kidding.
Bend. This is what a November Saturday morning usually looks like. We're getting rain.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. Well, I won't say beautiful, but it was nice yesterday. Temperatures in the 60s. We had sunshine actually for most of the week,
It's beautiful.
but it's supposed to be nasty all day today.
It is, and this is actually where I would have preferred a day game at Notre Dame Stadium because I feel like the nastier weather, the better off it's going to be for Notre Dame. But by the time the game kicks off at 7:30, it's just going to be cold and windy. It's not necessarily going to be rainy and nasty. So
Right.
it's
Right.
not going to be great. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, it's going to be a heck of a lot better than it is right now.
And we'll touch on the weather impact of this game a little bit later on in the show. Notre Dame and Clemson, 7:30 tonight at Notre Dame Stadium. Seventh all-time meeting between these two schools. We have a couple guests who are actually going to join us. I should mention over the course of this show, two Ryans. Ryan Roberts, our recruiting guy,
Yeah, baby.
is going to spit some recruiting game for us here in a little bit. This is another big
one.
Yeah, recruiting weekend because I was told the Stanford game was the biggest recruiting weekend of the year. Now I'm being told today is the biggest recruiting day of the year.
Well, so, that was the biggest recruiting day of the year
to that point. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So this has been the circled one from what I understand.
So Ryan Roberts is going to have Notre Dame recruiting stuff for us in a little bit. And then Ryan Kantor, who covers Clemson for tigernet.com. He'll have the Clemson side of things later on in the show as well. Of course, we've got our game day rapid fire. We've got all of our stuff coming up. But it is the seventh all-time meeting between Notre Dame and Clemson. Fourth time in the last 5 years they've met. You've got the 2015 game, speaking of rain, down at Clemson.
Yeah.
Oof. Hurricane Joaquin rolling through Clemson that year.
Woof.
Then you've got the 2018 college football playoff semifinals. Another woof.
Well, for other reasons.
Well, yeah, exactly. But then you've got the 2020 game here at Notre Dame Stadium. Not a woof. And then you've got the 2020 Part 2 ACC championship game.
Woof.
There you go. So it's becoming a more common occurrence. Notre Dame and Clemson. Hey, post-game show coming up afterwards later tonight. Who else on the post-game show tonight?
That's a solid question. I know I will be there. I know Brian will be there. Whether Sean and Ryan are there, I believe Ryan is going to be there because he's not obviously coming into South Bend, so I believe he will be there. And he's in the chat, so maybe he'll let us know. But I believe Ryan will be there. And hopefully Sean. I mean, this is a big game. I would hope that Sean would be there. The other Sean, not this Sean.
And you're talking about Sean Davis. He's coming to the game tonight, though, right?
Then he probably will not be there. If he's
That's what I thought I heard Brian say earlier this week.
Okay.
And then Jesse is going to be there tonight as well, right?
Yes, that is absolutely accurate. I forgot about that. Thank you. Yeah, Jesse's going to be there. So there's a chance. There's going to be 5 of us well, that is huge. That there's going to be 5 of us in the show tonight. So there you go. And Ryan is confirming that he will.
Ryan says he will be there. That's right.
That's good stuff.
That's right. Brent with his usual shout from Monterey, California, got his game day coffee in hand. And Jesse's girlfriend, Naomi, she was in Monterey this week, interestingly enough. And I was trying to hint, bring me back some compañeros, but that didn't go over well. So
come on, man. Is she really?
But I would have to go to Cleveland to get it anyway. So
is she daughter-in-law material at this point?
I know, right?
I mean, I'm just saying, just throwing that out there. I don't know what Jesse's plans are, but come on.
Seriously. All right. Well, Notre Dame's coming off the 41-24 win over Syracuse last week. Biggest thing you learned about the Fighting Irish last week, Vince, is what?
Oh man, you know what? I learned that almost every position group at Notre Dame can play well. and they can play well on the same day. And that is a bonus. And I also learned that Notre Dame, or no number 16 team in the country, is a match for Notre Dame. How about that? They're undefeated against number 16 teams. But how are they going to do against the number 4 team? That is the question that we have right now. But we saw a lot of things that we thought we were going to see a lot earlier in the season. I think in the last game, like I said, I thought the linebackers played well. I thought the defensive line played well. I thought the secondary played well. And then offensively, the wide receivers did what they needed to do. The running backs played hard. The offensive line just took it to the other side. You got one position that needs to step up. Other than that, the rest of this team is playing well. And they need to do that, obviously, today as well. They have yet to do that at home. And that is going to be the big question mark going into this game.
Vince, I'll play along with the charade. I'd love to tell that punt block team that I love them, but the point is probably moot at this point.
What are you, Rick Springfield Jr.?
If you're watching the chat, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
that was actually pretty good off the cuff. I'm going to say that. That's good.
I agree with what you're saying. What I've learned is this team is still wildly inconsistent because they can get big plays from all over, but they don't get them consistently, and I'm just still baffled by this whole 3-1 versus ranked teams, with the only loss being, of course, on the road at Ohio State, but you're 2-2 against unranked teams. And again, that's something we'll jump into more in detail later. But I learned that the defense can make plays. Now, it helps when the quarterback decides he's just going to throw one of the best safeties around, a ball on a little slant on the first play of the game that he can take back. Yeah, I know.
That set the tone. To be honest with you, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I was very nervous about that game going in. I picked Notre Dame to win because it was on the road and all those different things. But after that play, after the first play of the game, I was like, yeah, they're going to win. Like I had no more doubts. I know it's one play, but after that, I was like, oh, they're going to win. I had no issues the rest of the way.
But then, of course, Syracuse marches right down the field on their next drive and scores a touchdown.
That's true. So you're not wrong, sir.
Yeah, and again, like the defense, I just some baffling decisions sometimes. They were focused on Garrett Schrader, and there were some reports out there going into the game about Schrader's availability and the injury, and Notre Dame was focused on taking away his running, which they should have, I thought. But I think that showed on that drive, and at the end of the drive, once they get into the red zone again, by going without a safety, and then you've got Benjamin Morrison locked up one-on-one against a much bigger, Rondé Gadsden. And so I don't know. There's still so many glimmers there for the defense. Statistically, they are pretty good right up until you get in the red zone against them. And then it's like nonstop. They cannot stop.
And they're like top 20, I think is what I read. Maybe it's 17, but top 20 keeping teams out of the red zone. So getting them not in the red zone, they're a really good team. But once they enter, it's like, all right, we're done playing defense. We're good here.
Right.
Have a touchdown. You get a touchdown. You get a touchdown.
And Jesse brought up the point this week that there are not a whole lot of red zone opportunities necessarily, because they do force a lot of punts and a lot of 3-and-outs even. But it's once they get in the red zone, you get in the red zone and everybody scores,
Yes.
And it's keeping teams out of the red zone, keeping teams out of those scoring opportunities. Again, when you look at last week's game, is there anything you saw that applies to tonight's game potentially with Clemson?
And I read this the other day, and I still don't necessarily have an answer for that, except for I think the offensive line can play with this defensive line. I'm not saying that they're going to dominate Clemson's defensive line. That would be silly. I'm not going there. But I think they can play with them. And that means that they can run the ball. It's not going to be like the last 2 weeks. Anybody that says that is a complete and utter homer. But what I'm saying is they can play with this defensive line. They can make some progress. They can run the ball, at times. They can do enough to keep this offense in the game, keep drives alive, etc. I think this offensive line can do it. And if they can't, this is going to be a very short game. And it's not going to be a good game if you're a Notre Dame fan. So
Offensive line has to be on tonight.
Yes,
Like
they have to be.
all this improvement that we've seen from the offensive line. It's one thing to say, well, you've been good against
Right.
UNLV and whoever, because they were fairly average at times against Stanford, and that's they were good at times against Stanford, but there were other if your game plan is you're going to pound it between the tackles, you've got to be excellent in your execution.
Right.
I'm really curious to see what the game plan is tonight. We know they're going to have to run the ball.
Yes.
Audric Estime, a career high 20 carries for 123 yards last week, which is his second highest career total behind the 134 he had against North Carolina earlier this season, and 246 rushing yards. And I mean, that is the eye-popping thing still as they continue to string together all these 200-plus yard rushing games. It is the fourth time in the last 5 games they've gone for at least not even just 200, but at least 223. And their second highest total to 287 against North Carolina. We know they want to run the ball, but, again, like for Audric Estime specifically, very important for him to have that kind of game and very important for them to come out and establish him right away as the fullback in that I formation. They gave him the ball on the first 2 carries of the game and said, okay, we're confident in you, big guy. Those fumbles, we're not worried about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice to see not only did they give him an opportunity, but he answered the bell. I mean, he had one of the better games of his career in a game where there were people calling for him never to touch the ball again, right? And so that was great to see on both sides. Number one, they gave him the opportunity, and number two, he took it and seized it and, made the coaches happy. It paid off. It made the decision pay off, which I really, really liked.
Matthew says he liked Dabo's comments about the running backs. They have 3 grown men back there.
He's not wrong.
And they do. And it's a matter of how they use them. I think personally that Chris Tyree is going to be more important than at any point this season tonight. How you use Chris Tyree, Audric Estime and Logan Diggs are still going to be factors as well, but how you use Chris Tyree and how you can get the ball into his hands, a playmaker against the team that you're going to have to make plays against tonight.
They're going to have to get him in space. They're going to have to be creative with Chris Tyree. You don't have to be creative with, Audric Estime. Run him between the tackles.
It's very simple with Audric Estime.
Yep.
It's get him the ball and let him eat when it's time to eat.
But I feel like they're going to have to be creative with both the other running backs, to be honest with you. There's some other things, obviously, that you can do with Logan Diggs. He's kind of a hybrid between Tyree and Estime, so there's some different things that you can do. But Tyree, for the most part, you can't run him between the tackles and expect success. You can do that sometimes if it softens up because you've been pounding him on the outside. You can run him up the middle, and then one broken tackle later, he's, housing it for 80. But you need to get him on the outside. 100% need to get him on the outside. And if you can't do that, it's going to be a long day. I mean, you can't just continuously pound the middle. Need to see some outside zone, need to see some buck sweep, need to see a lot of that stuff that gets him to the outside.
That's right. They've got to find ways to get Chris Tyree involved. And I think that I think tonight, like if we're not going to see more 2-back stuff tonight, we're probably not going to see it the rest of the season. That's my personal take on that, because I've been harping on it. We've been talking about it. If you're not going to see more tonight against this kind of opponent, I just don't think we're going to see it.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. If you don't do it tonight, when are you going to do it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no point. There's no point in doing it in the first place, and you just got our hopes up and you got us excited for no reason.
Yep. Another punt block last week. Of course, the pick 6 on the first play of the game. And I mean, 2 big tide-turning plays. Yes. Right there. And then Maris Leofau's interception, of course, later on as well. But it's amazing because we have not seen punt blocks. It's like, oh, this can be a part of the game. And it's not just a part of the game. It's like it's a huge part of the game now at this point.
It is literally a third of the game now. And it's a third of the game that could win a game for Notre Dame. I mean, if they're even on offense and defense, the difference could be special teams. And right now, if we're doing like a tail of the tape or, whatever you want to call it, I give Notre Dame the edge in special teams. And Brian Mason is going to dial something up that is going to change the tide of this game. Can the offense and the defense put them in a position to where that tide-changing play makes a difference? That's the question for me.
Yep.
I think the special teams are going to go out there and make a play. They're going to make a play or two. Can the offense and defense back them up in order to make this a game?
Yeah, again, I mean, I think it goes without saying, right? You're playing a top 5 team now. Once again, you need all 3 phases to contribute tonight. This is not like everything has to fall on Drew Pine. Everything has to fall on the offense. You need all 3 phases. You're going to need some plays, whether that means it's John Sott and just continued good punting. But again, it's going to be windy tonight. How that's going to affect whether it's the punts or the field goals or whatever it happens to be. Like you might see Marcus Freeman make more decisions tonight, maybe not try to kick a field goal depending on which side of the field they're on, that kind of stuff.
That's a good point. We're going to be there. Side note, there is a tailgate today over at Notre Dame for Irish Breakdown. So make sure everybody comes out and says hi. Brian says he's going to be out there between 1 and 2 o'clock. Let's see here. I think he gave me some more specifics, but he says, remind people about the tailgate. Tell folks we'll be out in the stadium lot between 1 and 2 o'clock. So there you go. Stadium lot between 1 and 2 o'clock. So I'll be out there earlier as well, probably not at 1 or 2 o'clock, but I'll be out there.
Stadium lot's a pretty big lot. He needs to send a poll number at some point.
Yes, there will be a poll number. There will be you gotta check on the tweeter. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what the wind is gonna be like. I went through that whole thing to say that I'd like to get on the stadium ground before the game starts, on the field level, to see what the wind is like, because we're on the 9th floor. And we can go outside, but the wind is going to be completely different on the 9th floor as it is on the field level. So
big time difference.
Yeah, I'll be early. I'll be there early enough to see that.
The wind swirls anyway, but it's changed with these the additions with the new press box on the east side, and of course with the scoreboard there on the south side, or the jumbotron on the south side as well. The wind. Like the way the wind affects things is different now than it used to be before all that stuff. David has a super chat on the Chris Tyree subject. He says, I may be wrong, but does it seem like when Chris gets the ball, there are never any holes open? And, I don't know that it's about holes open. It's just, to me, it's about the contrast in his running style compared to Estime and Diggs, who are more physical guys who can just slam it up in there and kind of find the holes. The holes need to be a little bit different, I think, if you're going to run the ball with Tyree between the tackles.
Absolutely agree with you. And you're not setting him up for success. I mean, that's
exactly.
Like I said before, you can run in between the tackles, but you've got to soften up that middle a little bit, because he's a one-hit wonder as far as he's going to make one cut and he's going to go. And you can't be running that into a full box. That's not where he's going to have success. So you've got to soften up the middle by going outside. Then you can run him up the middle and he'll be just fine. And it has nothing to do with his cleats either. That's ridiculous. But yeah. Anyway.
All right.
It was a mention in the chat, so I had to
Gotcha.
Out there.
Gotcha. I was going to say, I tried to keep my eye over there, but I was dialing up. We're going to have a comment here that I'm going to play for Marcus Freeman here in just a second. But Notre Dame's now 3-1 on the road this season. All 4 games against ranked opponents. They are 2-2 at home this season, with the 2 losses, of course, to teams Marshall and Stanford that are now a combined 7-9 coming into this weekend. A lot of talk about Notre Dame's home record versus its road record, but there is a split as well between how they play against good teams and how they play against bad teams. And Marcus Freeman was asked about that this week, about playing up or down to the competition. And here's what he said.
You can look at it a couple of different ways. And is it a home game? Is it a away game thing? Is it a opponent thing? What we got to do is focus on the things that it takes to play well. And no matter who the opponent is, we have to truly focus on what it takes to deserve victory, what it takes to really be able to execute throughout the entirety of a game. And we can't let the opponent dictate our ability to focus on that and our ability to execute. And so, unfortunately, if you look at, some of the previous losses and some of the poor performances that, Have they been higher ranked teams? No. But as I tell our players, it's about continuing to improve, and it's about making sure this Saturday that we're performing at a high level, and that's all we really want to focus on.
All right, Vince, so what do you think?
He's right. I mean, he's saying all the right things. You can't allow the opponent to dictate how you play as far as whether you're up for a game or down for a game or whatever the case may be. That has to be internally. And that, as a coach, that's one of the hardest things, to be honest with you, is to get teams up for games that you should win. I mean, in my coaching experience, whether as an assistant or as a head coach, more often than not, you play down to the ability of the team that you're playing. And it is very tough to get teams up, even if it's like a crosstown rival. If they're having a down year and they stink, it's hard to get teams up for that. You know what I mean? And I get where he's coming from, but that's his responsibility. That's where he needs to be. So, I mean, he's saying all the right things. The proof's in the pudding. I mean, I don't think that there's going to be any issue getting up for this game. How could you not get up for this game? But Boston College, Navy, are you going to still be able to get up for those games after this game? I mean,
they kind of scare you, knowing the history this program has, in the last, a little bit more than a decade, I guess decade and a half now at this point. They've, after all those years, we used to be able to say, well, Roger Staubach was the quarterback the last time Notre Dame lost to Navy, and then that went out the window. The last couple coaches have lost to Navy, and Navy's coming up next week, right after a big matchup with Clemson. And I mean, all the focus right now is on Clemson, but that's still a scary prospect when you've got Navy, a team that considers you a rival, and Boston College, a team that considers you a rival before your biggest rival, USC, at the end of the regular season.
No doubt about it. I mean, again, you're going to have no issue getting up for today's game. You're going to have no issue getting up for the USC game. But what about the two games in between? One's at home, one's on the road. That's a big question mark with this group. I mean, and if there is no bigger question mark for me in Marcus Freeman's tenure, short tenure as it is, but there's no bigger question mark. Can he get these guys up for the games that you can't say they don't matter, because if you lose them, your season's over. But for the games that you should win and you should dominate, can he get them up for those games?
Yeah. And
I thought
to me,
that was a given for him, to be
honest.
Well,
no, I know. And it starts to look like, like you're obviously seeing uneven performances. And, early in the season, we were writing this writing it off to, well, you're not playing well at home versus you're playing well on the road. And now there's, again, the correlation to not just home versus away, but the home games until tonight. This is the first ranked opponent they have seen at home this season. All the ranked teams have been on the road. So, before it was, well, you're playing well at home versus, or, you're not well at home versus you're playing great on the road. And now there's a clear split also between ranked opponents, good opponents versus poor opponents. And Freeman was also asked this week about the fact that he decided in the offseason that he didn't want to continue to employ the mental performance specialist that Brian Kelly had with the team over the past 5 seasons. And here's his response to that.
We have resources for him to utilize here on campus, on an individual basis. And as far as, what we want our players thinking during the week and as they get ready for a game, it can be from the head coach or the position coach, and we're speaking similar messages. And it's the things that I feel as the head coach they should be thinking about and what's important. But again, we have to make sure we have resources to serve these guys that if necessary, they feel like they need it. We have resources for them in terms of mental performance.
So they have resources in terms of mental performance, but they don't have a specific mental performance coach, specialist any longer. Notre Dame had won 42 consecutive games against unranked opponents entering this season. That time correlates to the time where they did have the mental specialist and all that kind of stuff. The streak ended the first time that they had a chance to play an unranked opponent, week 2 against Marshall this season. So, Vince, could there be a correlation between the two?
No, I don't believe in that stuff. I'm sorry. I don't see that as being it.
Well, I don't know how you can't, though, when you look again. Why are you playing so crappy against unranked teams?
Well, she's on LSU staff right now. They lost to Florida State.
game one, they've played a lot better. So I'm not saying that it is the only reason, but there is obviously some kind of disconnection in how they are preparing for these teams that are supposed to be the lesser teams
right,
on
I get
the
that,
schedule.
but they have people that they can talk to. They just don't have that one person. And I mean, she might as well have put a diaper on the kicker for Notre Dame before when he would come off the field. I mean, it was ridiculous. Oh, it's okay. Like, come on, that's not sports performance. That's coddling. And that's a hard pass for me. And I was not a big fan of that particular situation to begin with. So I had no problem with them going a different direction.
I mean, it is a cottage industry in sports now. Like someone brought up the other day, well, Lou Holtz didn't have, a mental performance coach in '88. You're right, but next to nobody did. But pretty much everyone across professional sports included has some form of it. And,
they've got people to do that, though. They just don't have that one individual person. I know for a fact they've got people on staff that the kids can talk to and do all that stuff with. They just don't have that one human being in that role.
I mean, I have never worked with a mental performance coach, but I've seen, like plenty of these guys and, kind of sat back and watch some of the videos of them talking with teams and talking with players and how they go about preparing their minds and stuff like that and sort of redirecting their focus. Like the case with Jonathan Dorr specifically, tuning out the negative and trying to find that positive thing you can focus on. How much it actually impacts things, I don't know. But again, we have very clear evidence that this team is playing very well on the road against good teams, and they are playing at least very inconsistently at home against the teams that are the worst teams on their schedule this season. Again, the 2 losses they have at home against teams with a combined 7-9 record. So
I get what you're saying. Look,
at the very least, it can't hurt, I guess. There's
obviously a problem. There's a disconnect with playing teams that are below them. I just don't think it's the head shrinker. That's not. I'm sorry. I've been to seminars with that exact person leading the seminar, and I walked out of there rolling my eyes. Like, it just didn't do anything for me. And I've been in athletics my whole life, and it just didn't do anything for me. I don't know. It didn't resonate with me, and it must not have resonated with Marcus Freeman because that's why he got rid of her.
And as Tyler says, coaches should get the players ready. They should get them ready.
They should.
Are they getting them
But they're
ready?
not.
And again, that's part of why you have someone, because the coach has a lot of other things to deal with. And I think it can only help more than can hurt. Is it the difference? I don't know, but I think it can only help more than can hurt by having someone, like that as a resource. Yeah. Does it have to be that specific person? No, but I don't think it would be, I don't think it would hurt them to look into having someone in a similar position going forward.
Okay.
And again, we don't have to agree on this.
No, it's fine.
I get your perspective, but I do think that the mental side of this is a much bigger part of it than a lot of people, like David Ortiz used to say, it's about confidence. If I go to the plate, I know I'm going to get this pitcher.
Okay, I give
you
that.
If I have doubt in my mind, I've already lost this at bat. And the guy's in the Hall of Fame, and there are plenty of other guys. And I'm not saying that he was working with the mental, but what I'm saying, the mental aspect is a much bigger part of this kind of thing than we know. And again, I think it can only help more than it can hurt by having a resource like that.
I see what you're saying, and the whole confidence thing, as far as David Ortiz is talking about. If you don't have confidence when you're doing what you're doing at the Division I level, then you shouldn't be playing. I don't. Nope. You shouldn't need a 5'4" blonde lady to give you confidence. That's what wives are for, or girlfriends. That's not what a mental person is for.
Yeah. Well, maybe we need to look into having one of these people on the show in the future.
Great. I'll just be like this.
Get Vince's mind right. And just there's at least one person on my side. Mike says I totally agree with Sean on the subject. So
we don't
all have to agree on this. I'm just saying you're Notre Dame. you have the resources to have that kind of resource on the staff. And I would rather err on the side of, why not, rather than just say, well, they can talk to the coaches, they can talk to other people if they want to. Especially, again, when you look at the inconsistent play that they've had. There's some kind of disconnect going on. It is Marcus Freeman's job to figure out how to reconnect that disconnect. And I don't know if it's this or if it's something else, but there's pretty clear data saying this is an inconsistent team, and we can all see the inconsistencies.
Well, that's fair, but why couldn't this little mentalist lady get them to win in big games and play with confidence in big games?
Well, isn't that why Marcus Freeman was the guy to go to, because you needed a recruiting boost?
They played better against Ohio State in a big game than they've ever played under Brian Kelly in a big game.
See, Ryan's all over. You said Vince is so insensitive. Speaking of Ryan, we're going to let Ryan take center stage right now, because this is the biggest recruiting.
That's right. That's what we've been told.
Weekend of the year. And it is time to check in with Ryan about just how big this recruiting weekend is. He's going to give us all the updates or the details about who's visiting this weekend.
Good morning, IB Nation. Ryan Roberts here at Rise and Draft on Twitter, Director of Scouting here at irishbreakdown.com. Of course, with the massive opportunity that Notre Dame has this weekend, taking on the number 4 team in the country, Clemson, at home Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. There is a lot of layers to this football game. We've talked all week about the importance of this game from the Notre Dame perspective, from the current players, current coaches, but I want to talk to you a little recruiting preview for this weekend, because I cannot quantify well enough, in my opinion, how vital this weekend is, not only for finishing out the 2023 recruiting class, but for the 2024 class, 2025 class, 2026 class. This is going to have, I think, some real substantial stay power in the recruiting world. Over 60 recruits are expected on campus for this matchup against the University of Clemson. And it's going to be a wild ride, to say the least. So let's take you through a few of the more important visitors this weekend. I want to start first and foremost with, and I think that this is an incredible job by the Notre Dame staff to get so many committed players on campus this weekend to help the recruiting process. They're going to obviously experience the day for themselves, and they're there to enjoy the fans, enjoy the game, enjoy building those relationships with each other and the coaches. But having so many committed players on campus can't be undersold. The importance is vital for the future classes for Notre Dame football. So CJ Carr, quarterback out of Saline High School in the state of Michigan, will be on campus. Jaden Greathouse, wide receiver out of Austin Westlake in the state of Texas, will be there, as well as Braylon James out of the state of Texas from Round Rock Stony Point High School in Texas. Cam Williams, 2024 wide receiver out of Glenbard South in Illinois, will be there. So will Cooper Flanagan out of De La Salle High School in California, tight end in the 2023 class. Jack Larson, 2024 class, tight end out of Charlotte Catholic, will also be there. Charles Jagasaw, fresh off of his season ending out of Alleman High School in the state of Illinois, will be on campus, as well. Sullivan Absher, offensive tackle out of South Point in the 2023 class. Sam Pendleton, offensive lineman out of Reagan High School, in the state of North Carolina. Joe Oddie will be in attendance out of Hayden High School in Topeka, Kansas. Brendan Vernon, 2023 defensive end out of Mentor in Ohio, will be there as well. Brandon Davis Swain out of Les Bloomfield in the state of Michigan. Owen Wafel, 2024 defensive tackle out of Princeton, New Jersey, the Hun School. Drake Bowen, of course, you should expect Drake Bowen on campus every single week out of Maryville, Indiana, on Andrean High School, off of another big victory last night in the state playoffs. Jaden Osbury out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. University Lab is expected on campus today, as well as 2023 linebacker Preston Zinter out of Central Catholic in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Christian Gray, cornerback out of the Smet Jesuit in St. Louis, Missouri, will be on campus, as well as Peyton Bowen, 2023 safety out of Denton Guyer in the state of Texas. Adon Schuler out of Irvington High School in the state of New Jersey will also be there, another 2023 safety. And Ben Minich from Westchester, Ohio, Lakota West, the last safety in the 2023 class, which is one of the most dynamic safety groups in the entire nation for the 2023 class. Andrew Cross out of Louisville, Kentucky, St. Xavier, preferred walk-on long snapper will also be, that is committed to Notre Dame, will be on campus. So let's start there. It's a great way to start, I believe, for what the importance of having the committed players on campus. Peyton Bowen is the big one. There has been a lot of misinformation thrown out there about Peyton Bowen. We've talked about a lot of it on the message board. You should go to boards.irishbreakdown.com, by the way, if you want to get a little more intel into the recruiting weekend that we have going on this year. But everything we're hearing is Peyton Bowen is very solid to Notre Dame. I think that getting him on campus and potentially having a big victory over Clemson could be a huge point in, kind of that final piece towards signing day of Peyton Bowen solidified in this class. So it's going to be a big weekend getting the Bowen brothers in general. I'm going to talk about Eli here in a minute, but getting Peyton Bowen back on campus, I think, is absolutely gigantic for this Notre Dame team. Notre Dame program, a player that has been very, very involved in the recruiting process for Notre Dame, building those relationships with the other 2023 recruits in the class, as well as the coaches. We think that Peyton Bowen is still very solid to Notre Dame. So let's start with the 2023 class of uncommitted players. It's a small group. What you have to understand is that Notre Dame already with 23 commits in the 2023 recruiting class, there's not a ton of spots left. So we are nearing the end and only a few weeks really until signing day, which is pretty wild. This class is pretty much solidified at this point, only a couple spots left. An important player that will be on campus today is Caleb Smith, who is a 2023 wide receiver out of Reedy High School in Frisco, Texas. Now, there's been a lot of talking about Tayshawn Lyons. Who's that last wide receiver spot in the class? From what we have heard, the staff prefers Caleb Smith right now. He's the player that they want to push for to be that fifth wide receiver dynamic group in the 2023 class. So Caleb Smith, the whole backstory was coming into this visit, he was originally set to take an unofficial visit because he was still committed to Texas Tech. Now, kind of unexpectedly, because the staff didn't really know if he was going to decommit, stay committed, whatever. He did decommit from Texas Tech yesterday on Friday. So this now makes this visit an official visit. And just kind of, this is where our pulse is on this one. If this weekend goes really well, this is one that could be done pretty soon here. We think that Notre Dame is trending in a very good direction. The fact that he decommitted from Texas Tech coming into this visit is massive for Notre Dame. So keep eyes on Caleb Smith, talented wide receiver out of the state of Texas, would be Notre Dame's third wide receiver out of the state of Texas in the 2023 class, joining Braylon James and Jaden Greathouse. Another player to keep a close eye on is Bogart, Georgia, North Oconee athlete Khalil Barnes, goes by KB. Now, he is a player that could play wide receiver on the next level. He could play defensive back. I believe that defensive back would probably be the starting point for him on the next level. So kind of what is working here is that Notre Dame wants the fifth wide receiver we just talked about. Caleb Smith seems to be the guy that they want. And then they want an athlete in this class. Now, the player that I believe they want most is Brandon Hillman out of Churchland High School in Virginia. Now, if they're not able to close on Brandon Hillman, who has already announced that he is going to make his commitment on December 7th, then I believe that Khalil Barnes will be the guy that Notre Dame would push for that athlete spot in the class. So could play defensive back, could play wide receiver. Everything that we're being told, hey, Clemson is high on his list, but I think that Notre Dame does have a shot here if they do push. I think that Khalil is very open to them. In a article I had earlier this week, I got to sit down with Khalil a little bit and just kind of pick his brain about the process. I do think Notre Dame would be a real player in this conversation if it kind of trended that way, and Notre Dame did make a push. So keep an eye on Khalil Barnes this weekend as well. Then the last interesting 2023 recruit that will be on campus, preferred walk-on This is St. Mary's wide receiver out of Orchard Lake, Michigan, Ryan Mooney. So Ryan Mooney is a raw football player. He's only been playing football for this is now his second year. He was a baseball player and actually committed to the University of Notre Dame as a baseball player at one point. 6'4", 170 pounds, supposed 4'2", 4'3" speed. So he's a height, weight, speed guy, but he's a raw football player, which is why Notre Dame is looking at him as a preferred walk-on right now. It'll be interesting to see because he's starting to pick up offers, kind of left and right here. Preferred walk-on versus a full scholarship. There's going to be a lot of conversation points here, but he's kind of put baseball to the side. He's a football player moving forward here. So keep an eye out on Ryan Mooney, who I know has a nice opinion of Notre Dame. Will it end up in the class as a preferred walk-on? We'll see. But interesting player to watch. Those are a couple of the 2023 guys that you definitely want to take a look at for today. Quick roundup on the 2024 commits that'll be on campus today. This is the more important part for me, right? 2023, not a lot of players on campus that are uncommitted from the 2023 class. 2024 is where Notre Dame can really hit this visit out of the park, in my opinion. Aeneas Williams, running back out of Hannibal High School. Notre Dame likes him. He likes Notre Dame. He's been on campus a couple times already in Notre Dame, but he is a riser on the recruiting scene, and he's really started to pull in a lot of great offers. So all-purpose back. It's going to be some comparisons to Kyron Williams, and for good reason. I mean, he can catch the football. He can run the football. He can block. There's a lot of great things. He even plays defensive back for Hannibal, and he's a really good defensive back for his high school. So Aeneas Williams, key player to watch. One of the more intriguing players that will be on campus today, in my opinion, this is Ainsworth, Nebraska high school tight end Carter Nelson in the 2024 class. Listed at 6'5", 210 pounds. Does not currently hold an offer for Notre Dame, but I believe Notre Dame is going to get in on this one. And if you pop on this kid's film, this is an athletic, long athlete. So Notre Dame already has Jack Larson in the 2023 class. But if they push for Carter Nelson, I think that he would be a great addition potentially. He's got a nice opinion of Notre Dame. Got to speak with him earlier in the week. This is just, will they offer? Where does it go from here type of thing? But Carter Nelson's a really talented player out of the state of Nebraska that if I was Notre Dame, I would push for. And I believe that Notre Dame may also do that. So we'll see. Christopher Jones, linebacker out of Mountain View High School in Stafford, Virginia. This kid is extremely talented, listed anywhere between 6'2", 215 pounds, 6'3", 220 plus pounds, depending on what recruiting service you're on. This is the type of kid that can play Mike, can play Will. He is long, he's explosive, and this will be his first game in Notre Dame and first time in Notre Dame. First time in Notre Dame, just experienced everything from a recruiting perspective. Him and his parents last summer, they go to Notre Dame to kind of do all the academic things, tour the facilities, that type of thing. But this is the real opportunity for him to get to talk to the coaches more in depth, see the players, see the facilities again, but experience a game day. This will be big for Christopher Jones, who I think Notre Dame is very high on in the 2023 class. Very talented linebacker. Speaking of talented linebackers, Rover, depending on how you look at him, Garrett Stover out of Big Walnut High School in Sunbury, Ohio. The cousin of current starting tight end for Ohio State, Cade Stover. Now, people are going to look at this one and say Ohio State's got the inside track, and that could very well be true. But what I will say is that Garrett, since being offered during the Irish invasion, he is very open to Notre Dame. Very open to Notre Dame. So I think that this visit could have a big impact on just how realistic it is to have Garrett Stover a part of this class. Really talented kid, 6'2", 200 pounds. He is the ideal rover in Notre Dame's defense that could also eventually become a will down the line. But he is explosive, plays almost a mid-hole safety role for Sunbury, for Big Walnut, excuse me. Similar usage in high school to what Pete Werner was used out of Cathedral High School when he was coming out. So, interesting player. If I was Notre Dame and he was open to the conversation, that would be my rover in this class that I would really push for. Talented player. Eli Bowen is another one, folks, that I already talked about. Peyton Bowen, the importance there. I want to emphasize this every time I talk about Eli Bowen. whether he would be the younger brother of Peyton Bowen or not in this class, Notre Dame likes Eli and wants him in this class. He is a priority for them no matter what. He's a kid that can play inside, can play outside, really good man cover guy with great eyes, instincts, can tackle. But, I mean, just the football IQ that this young man has at such a young age is phenomenal. He just always seems to be in the right spot. So I'm a big fan of Eli Bowen. I know the coach staff is as well. So look for them to continue to push for Eli, who is being recruited by some of the big dogs in college football. You know, he has a great relationship with the Oregon staff at this point. Notre Dame needs to have a big weekend, I believe, with Eli Bowen to continue to push for such a talented player. Braden Lee, cornerback out of Charles Herbert Flowers in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. This young man reminds me a whole lot of Cam Hart's. He's long, he's athletic, a little bit raw, but the tools are fantastic. I believe they really like Braden Lee in this class. They want to continue to push, obviously, and hopefully that relationship keeps building this weekend, because I know that he speaks well of Notre Dame, but now it's about actualizing and continuing to build that relationship even further. Interesting player that will be on campus. Archbishop Moeller, cornerback out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Carson Hobbs, who is currently committed to the University of South Carolina. Now, from what I am told, the staff really likes Carson Hobbs, and it's easy to see why. 6'1", 180, long arms, athletic. He's got all the tools to work with. Also plays some wide receiver for his school as well, so he's got pretty good ball skills as well. Commit to South Carolina. I would not be shocked if that is changed sometime soon. I think that he really likes Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame also really likes Carson Hobbs. So keep a close eye on Carson Hobbs. I'm not saying he's on decommitment watch and recommitment watch. Not saying that. All I'm saying is that I think this one is trending towards Notre Dame, and he has been very open with us in the past that he is going to let the whole process play out. He is not done with this recruiting process. So keep an eye out on Carson Hobbs out of the state of Ohio. Kaj Sanders, who is a defensive back, safety out of Bergen Catholic in New Jersey. The teammates of former Bergen Catholic stars and now Notre Dame players, Steve Angeli, quarterback in the 2022 class, and 2022 cornerback Jaden Bellamy, who are both on the Notre Dame roster now. Now, this young man is an interesting player for Bergen Catholic. He plays cornerback, he plays safety, he's even played running back for them on offensively. Notre Dame sees him as safety, 6'1", 180 pounds, and Notre Dame has kept very, very close contact. Going back to when they were recruiting Steve Angeli and Jaden Bellamy, they have been on this kid for a while now, and Kaj Sanders is very, very intrigued with Notre Dame. So keep a close eye on him as well. And then the last 2023 player worth keeping an eye on is Bronte Johnson out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, Northside High School, being recruited by a lot of schools as a wide receiver. Notre Dame likes him as a safety. This one is one for me that if the fit makes sense from a full scope perspective, I would expect Notre Dame to be a pretty, I don't want to say clear leader, but one of the leaders for Bronte Johnson. I think Bronte really likes Notre Dame. Just about Notre Dame, kind of checking those boxes and making sure the fit makes total sense before absolutely pushing for him. But obviously a player to keep a close eye on, one of the better players in the state of Indiana for the 2024 recruiting class. Couple notes on some other players that will also be on campus this weekend. 2024 class, Bryce Young will be on campus, who is the son of Bryant Young in the 2024 class. Sam Piloff out of Middleton High School in Wisconsin will be there as well. Pretty highly rated player in his own right. In the 2025 class, some fun names to keep an eye on. Jamar Malone II out of Higley High School, in Gilbert, Arizona. One of the top quarterbacks in the 2025 class so far rated. He's an interesting player to watch. They also, it's going to make some people feel old. I just mentioned Bryant Young's son, Jerome Bettis Jr., wide receiver out of Westminster School in Atlanta, Georgia, will be on campus today. He's been on campus many times in the past due to who his father is, of course. This will be a big opportunity for him to experience the recruiting side of things, though. So excited to get Jerome Bettis Jr. on campus. Also, Khalik Lockett out of Texas, wide receiver in the 2025 class. Very highly rated, already getting a lot of offers so far. Keep an eye on Lockett as Notre Dame hopes to make a good impression with him today. Another blast from the past, Marshall Pritchett, tight end out of Charleston, South Carolina. He's out of Ribbon Gap, the Chose School. I completely butchered that. My apologies. But he is the son of Wes Pritchett, of course, former Notre Dame player. Keep an eye on him. Dallas Golden is a big one to be on campus today for Notre Dame. We are told that Notre Dame really likes Dallas Golden. He is out of Berkeley Prep in Tampa Bay, Florida, which is the same school as Keon Keeley. So that's going to bring up some bad memories for Notre Dame. But they really, really like Dallas Golden. He plays offense and defense for Berkeley Prep. Really talented player to keep a close eye on in the class. So those are some of the names. Also, Dia Bell, who is a quarterback out of American Heritage in the state of Florida, who's the younger son of Raja Bell, former NBA player and NBA champion. So that is the full list for you all. 2023, 2024, 2025, and even some 2026 that will be on campus today. Going to be exciting times for this weekend. Make sure to check out boards.irishbreakdown.com. We will be having a intensive recruiting updates as far as all the things that we are hearing this weekend. So make sure to stay locked there. This is the biggest recruiting weekend for Notre Dame in this season. So I will be busy. Sean Davis will be busy. And the rest of the staff, of course, will always be busy bringing you guys as much intel as we can provide. But more than anything, I want to wish everybody a happy weekend and go Irish.
All right, well, that was Ryan Roberts, our recruiting expert, letting us know what is going on in the recruiting ranks so far today. Very exciting stuff with Ryan, and I still can't believe that we're talking about 2026 kids coming on campus. Oh, hello. All right, I'm back. I still can't believe we're talking about 2026 kids coming on campus. 2025 was hard enough. But now we're talking about 2026. So those are kids that are freshmen in high school right now, and they're making visits to Notre Dame as prospects. And that just, I don't even know what to say about all that. That is absolutely nutty to me. Sean, I think we may have you back.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yes. We were
Awesome.
getting all that weird feedback, but you're back. So it's good.
Yeah, I think what happens when we play the video like that, what happens is my mic, it like goes away for some reason.
Well, you're back, and that's the important thing.
Here I am. Yes, that's right. I thought it was good enough just to unmute myself, but that did not work. Technology, baby. All right. Well, thanks to Ryan. As always, big recruiting weekend, as you can tell, and a lot of chatter in the chat about the recruiting weekend. You want to look at Clemson a little specifically now?
I mean, we might as well. That is who they play now today, as opposed to talking about kids who were freshmen in high school. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Just weird for me. It's just weird, Sean. I don't know.
I know. What did you say? Is your son a 20? What's his graduation year?
25.
25.
So now we're talking about kids that are younger than my own actual.
And we're talking about 26s already. No kidding.
I can't do it, man. I just can't do it. It's weird.
No kidding. So Clemson, of course, 8-0 coming into today's game and ranked 4th in the first college football playoff rankings. It is year 14 for Dabo Swinney.
That is nuts.
I know.
That by itself, of all the stats that I've seen so far this year, or I mean, for this game and whatever Clemson is doing, that's the one that jumped off the page to me. I remember the day that he was hired. And
I do too. And that's I was going to say, I remember doing old shows back in the day I would have a guy on from that area talking about what's going on at Clemson. And they're like, this Dabo Swinney guy. And it's someone who I hadn't really heard of before. And here he is now, year 14, and all the success that he's had.
Yeah. I don't know why I remember this or why this is something that sticks out in my head, but I was in a smoothie shop with my wife and they had the TV on. And for whatever reason, it was on ESPN and they were announcing the hiring of Dabo Swinney. I was like, oh, he seems like a cool guy. I'll be rooting for this guy. Hopefully he'll be able to turn things around down there. Blah, 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 blah. Never would have guessed that this is what would have happened with Dabo Swinney. So I am shocked that it's been 14 years. That just means that I'm old.
I know.
That's not cool.
158 wins and 2 national championships later. I think that guy's got the thing rolling down there.
Didn't see that
in
coming.
Clemson. I know.
And I'm sure if you
I mean,
ask
that's to me what's amazing, because this is a program that, it had a national championship before it. It had some sporadic success over the years, but it has become a full-blown national power under Dabo Swinney. That's what's amazing to me, that he really took this program that had no real long-term traction and turned it into one that's succeeding year in and year out. 4 college football playoff appearances, and a 3-loss win last year was like national disaster down there in Clemson.
Yeah, absolutely. And that tells you the place that he has put Clemson, that now Clemson fans are very similar to Notre Dame fans, where a 2-3-loss season, disaster.
I know.
Disaster. There's no room for success there. It's a disaster. And but it kind of felt like a disaster last year for Clemson, didn't it? I mean, when they lost those few games at the beginning of the season, it was like,
exactly.
Their season's over, and they still won 10 games. So heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? I mean, he's gotten them to a point where that is the expectation, and it should be down there at this point.
And he had some turnover on the coaching staff. Longtime defensive coordinator Brent Venables, who was always, why is he still a defensive coordinator? Why isn't he a head coach? He's at Oklahoma now as a head coach, and the offensive coordinator Tony Elliott is a head coach at Virginia. So they've got Wes Goodwin running the defense, Brandon Streeter running the offense, and I've got Ryan Kantor, who covers Clemson. We'll talk about those guys coming up here in a little bit, but DJ Uiagalelei, we saw him 2 years ago at Notre Dame Stadium when Trevor Lawrence couldn't go, and had a career game in that game in terms of his passing yards, 439 yards, 63% completion percentage this year, 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I mean, numbers-wise, it doesn't look awful. He's been sacked 12 times. He's run for over 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, and we're expecting him to start tonight. I think we've got every reason to believe he's going to start tonight. But, he did not have a good game a couple of weeks ago against Syracuse, their last time out. He threw two interceptions in that game. I guess just some of your thoughts on Big DJ coming into tonight.
I mean, he's a fairly one-dimensional quarterback. I mean, yes, he can put the ball on the ground and he can run, but that's not what he wants to do. He wants to be in the pocket. He wants to pick you apart. He wants to throw the ball. So he is a bit of a statue back there. Everybody talks about how much weight he's lost and how much more mobile he is. And 12 sacks over 8 games isn't a ton. I mean, it's, what is that, 1.25 sacks a game? So, I mean, that's okay. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Notre Dame needs to put more pressure on him than that. If they're going to be successful, maybe the sack numbers don't need to be super high, but the pressure numbers need to be high. They need to get him off of his base. They need to get him moving around. He doesn't scare me with his legs. He's a big kid, but he's not
like he's blazing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, our linebackers can match up with him just fine. I'm not worried about him as a runner. So you need to affect his passing platform. And so they need to get in his face. They need to dial up pressures. Frankly, the game plan that they had against Syracuse in the first half is a game plan that I would replicate in this game.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they need to do.
Fairly similar, both,
right.
Again, like big quarterbacks who are mobile, but are not like Tyler Buckner fast by any means. Right. They can hurt you with their legs kind of late, but Will Shipley, the running back, a name, of course, a lot of many Notre Dame fans will recognize, kind of the one that got away a couple of years ago when he committed to Clemson over Notre Dame, but he's run for almost 750 yards, averaging 6 yards per carry with 10 touchdowns, and he's got 19 receptions as well. And he's a big part of this offense that doesn't feature the kind of big game-breaking type receivers like they used to have a couple of years ago with guys like Higgins and Ross and those kind of guys.
I mean, to be honest with you, the only offensive threat that scares me is Will Shipley. You can't let him get loose. I mean, you're going to have to stop their run game and not allow him to beat you, because the numbers that he has are actually really impressive. I mean, and they use him out of the backfield too. I mean, 19 catches over 8 games is pretty darn good. So they're going to have to stop Will Shipley if they want to win this game, right? And I mean, their receivers are good. They're good. I mean, it's a good complementary group of wide receivers, but no one guy, scares the death out of you. You know what I mean? I mean, it's the group, and that starts with DJ. And if he can sit back there and pick apart the defense, then that group is going to beat you. But there's not one guy that you're like, oh man, we got to bracket this guy. You know what I mean? So it all starts with the quarterback to the run game, and then you can be successful against this offense.
Yeah, that's it. I think that for the first time, really, since these teams have played each other more often since 2018, this is the first time where I feel pretty confident in Notre Dame's secondary against Clemson's receivers, and where Notre Dame might even have the edge in this matchup in terms of secondary versus receivers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they can. I think this secondary has a really good opportunity to lock down these receivers, and I think that will ultimately lead to more pressure on the quarterback because he's not going to be able to throw the ball super quick. Now, they're going to have to fix a few things. They can't give inside leverage, and they can't give those slants when they're blitzing the linebackers and there's nobody to get underneath those slants. You can't do that. We can't see Ben Morrison lining up outside and giving the inside to a big, tall receiver. Can't do that. But those are little things. Those are little fundamental things that you need to clean up and that you need to fix. And if they do that, Notre Dame has the talent in the secondary to match up with these receivers. No problem. They just need to do it. And again, like I said, that will lead to more pressure on the quarterback and more indecision on his part.
Defense for Clemson, allowing just a shade under 20 points per game, 21st in the nation scoring defense, only 88 rushing yards per game they're giving up, number 7 in the nation. From a pass yard standpoint, they rank 87th. Of course, the defensive line is their strength. And
absolutely,
Miles Murphy and Brian Breesy are among Dane Brugler from The Athletic, the guy who puts together all the draft stuff every year. He is those two guys, along with linebacker Trenton Simpson, are in Brugler's top 15 in terms of NFL draft prospects for next year. And you look at their defensive line: Murphy, 5.5 sacks; Tyler Davis, 4 sacks; Xavier Thomas, 2 sacks; KJ Henry, 2 sacks. I can go on down the line. The defensive line for Clemson has combined for 18 of the team's 22 sacks through 8 games. It is far and away the strength of the Clemson defense.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and you have to neutralize that. I mean, you have to misdirection them. You have to option them, in the zone read game. You have to, there's different things you can do to slow down a really good defensive line, but that's the strength of the defense. There's no doubt about it, and you can't just run right at them. There are times where you can, but that can't be your entire game plan, right? I mean, you can go up the middle. I don't want people to think, it's all got to be outside and they run it up the middle. They're stupid. No, you can run it up the middle. That is something you can do.
You have to pick your spots.
But you have to soften it up. You have to be able to have success outside so that it loosens up the box and you get some guys out. You start spreading them out a little bit. Then you can run up the middle. You are going to have to run up the middle in order to have success. Okay? That's a given. But they have to pick their spots, like you said. So this defensive line is by far their best area on defense. I think our running backs are better than their linebackers. I think our wide receivers can play with the secondary for sure, especially seeing what the secondary has done this year. It's just you have to neutralize their defensive line. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I feel like this offensive line can have some success. I really do.
I think so too. And as we spin this now and look, what we're most confident in and our biggest concerns in this game, and like Matt Lee, and I just kind of said this a second ago, Matt Lee saying they don't have a T. Higgins type receiver to worry about this year. I do agree with that. And again, I think what I'm most confident in, or one of the things I'm most confident in as I look at this matchup, is the secondary aspect of it. That Notre Dame's secondary can cover these Clemson receivers downfield and give Notre Dame's front 7 a chance to get to DJ Uiagalelei and disrupt him and give them a chance, to cause some disruptive plays and not let him be the guy just picking Notre Dame apart and making huge plays downfield like we've seen in some of these past matchups with these two teams. The secondary versus Clemson's wide receivers is, again, for probably the first time since these teams have been playing, it's something that I'm really confident in going into this matchup tonight.
Yes, I like that matchup. And at the very least, you can stalemate there and allow your front 7 to do some work against, the run game and DJ Uiagalelei. So I like the defensive matchup versus Clemson's offense for sure. I think that they can compete. Absolutely. And it's actually not my worry in this game.
What is your worry in this game, VD?
Well, my worry is the quarterback position. And I know
Okay.
that's the easy part to jump on, but it's the obvious part to me. I think the running backs have elevated their game. I think the offensive line has elevated their game. As of last week, I think the wide receivers have elevated their game. The quarterback needs to be the driver. You know, you don't have to put the whole game on him. You need a run game. We've talked about that ad nauseum. Drew Pine is a quarterback where you need the run game for him to be successful, right? But he needs to complete the layups. He needs to make one or two plays that maybe you're not expecting Drew Pine to make in a game of this caliber. You need that, whether it's a downfield throw to Tobias, whether it's a seam throw to Michael Mayer, whatever the case may be. He's going to have to make one or two of those plays to get them out of trouble, right? Or score a touchdown. And he's going to have to make the layups. You're going to have to get Chris Tyree involved. You're going to have to throw some slants. You're going to have to throw some more RPOs. He's going to have to be good in the read option, because one way to neutralize a defensive lineman is to option him. Don't even block him. Make him be wrong. You can do that with Drew Pine. So he's going to have to be Drew Pine. Drew Pine needs to be Drew Pine. He can't be the bad Drew Pine. He doesn't have to be the amazing Drew Pine. He just has to be BYU Drew Pine, and you're in great shape, and you can win this game. But that's my biggest question mark going in, and that's what worries me.
Yeah. Colin says this is the game to get Meriwether, Colsey, Thomas, and Mayer on the field all at once. I would throw Tyree into that as well.
I would too.
Those have been the guys who are starting to emerge as guys who can make plays. And I mean, obviously you can mix and match the running backs quite a bit, but again, I think Chris Tyree is a big key to this game tonight. How you're able to get him involved, whether it's screen passes that people have talked about. There needs to be more misdirection involved in this. And again, I still keep going back to, this is not the kind of game where you just line up in 12 personnel and try to pound Clemson. I think 11 personnel can be a good matchup by spreading things out a little bit more, and 21 as well.
If we see them come out in a bunch of 12 and 13 personnel over and over again, it's like, you obviously haven't learned anything. I mean, you're literally running into the teeth of this defense. That is not going to get you anywhere. You need to spread this defense out. You need to make them wrong, and you need to abuse the secondary. That's what you need to do.
Yep. As Tom says, please throw the ball to Tyree.
Absolutely. Yes. And I also want to say, you don't need Drew Pine to sit in the pocket and pick these guys apart. That's not his game.
No.
And if that's your game plan, that's wrong too.
But he also shouldn't be throwing when there's not some kind of play action involved either, considering what they've shown with the running game this season.
Absolutely. You need to establish a run game. I have no problem with that. But you don't need to establish the running game with 13 personnel. Or as whoever the color guy was last week, 14 personnel with Jade Thomas. Okay. That's not how you establish the running game. You need to run the ball with 11 and 21 personnel. That's what you need to do.
Yes, exactly. I'm looking. I thought I had a Marcus Freeman comment about red zone, but I am not able to find it. So I guess we will not play that. But my biggest concern is just the red zone matchup tonight, because Clemson, number 3 in the nation in red zone offense scoring opportunities. They are scoring at a 97% clip when they get into the red zone. 16 rushing touchdowns. And again, that goes to both Uiagalelei and Will Shipley. 12 passing touchdowns and 10 field goals. Now, you can live with field goals if you're Notre Dame.
You absolutely can.
Like, you can have get off the field by just giving up a field goal. That would be a success for this defense, but the red zone defense is tied for last in the nation. 20 chances opponents have had in the red zone. They've given up 8 rushing touchdowns, 9 passing touchdowns, and 3 field goals. If you can cut the touchdown number, if they get to the red zone 3 times, you can hold them to 2 field goals and only give up 1 touchdown, that would be a success, I think.
It'd be a huge success, no doubt about it. And again, Notre Dame has done a very good job of keeping teams out of the red zone. But once they get in, it's like Oprah on Christmas. I mean, you just giving away touchdowns for free. I mean, they have to, the whole bend but don't break situation, where they don't bend very well, but they break all the time when they're in the red zone. And they need to not only keep Clemson out of the red zone, which they can do, but once they get in, you've got to play better defense. You have to, if they want to be successful. If they get in 3 times and score 3 touchdowns or more, that's when you're going to have a major problem, because I don't trust this offense to go down And I don't trust this offense in a shootout, right? Because
Yes.
there's just too many
Can't be a
variables.
shootout.
It cannot be a shootout. The defense has to give the offense opportunities, and then the offense has to capitalize on them.
Well, I mean, that's what happened in the last game. Remember the Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah play.
Right.
Defense made a play. It's again, it has to come from all three phases tonight. You can't put this solely on Drew Pine. You can't put it solely on the offense. It's got to come through in all phases tonight. And part of that whole red zone thing is make it harder for them to get into the red zone, and that starts with special teams when you're punting. And again, it's raining right now. The rain is supposed to die by tonight, but it is still supposed to be really windy tonight. And that potentially is going to be a big factor this evening in that wind, whether it's, do you maybe turn down a field goal? Like we were praising Marcus Freeman, take your points when you can.
Sure.
But if you're kicking into the wind, maybe you might want to consider more going for it rather than kicking. And, the punting situation, everything, but it's going to be on both sides as well. It's not going to be just Notre Dame affected by that. Whether it's the passing game, the kicking game, whatever it happens to be, with wind gusts up to 40 miles an hour potentially tonight, weather's going to be a factor this evening, Vince.
No, absolutely. And, they're on the field turf, right? And so, it's going to get saturated all day with the rain. It's going to be slippery. Like wet field turf is slippery. And so that's going to come into play as well. So what is that going to do with the run game? What is that going to do with, the passing game as far as breaks and cuts and all of those different things? And so it's going to be very interesting to see how things go. But the wind, if it's supposed to be super windy this afternoon, and it's supposed to die just a little bit by the evening, but it's still going to be windy. I think that favors Notre Dame at the moment.
Like the gust can come up, like we live in South Bend. We know it. We've seen it before.
The gust from the gods, as they said in Tin Cup, right? Like, Notre Dame's going to need one at the right moment to gust the wrong way just to help out, Notre Dame in some form or fashion. So this is where you want one of those gusts from the gods to help you out. But it's going to be interesting to see what the weather is actually like once the sun goes down and the rain stops and what that looks like. But there's still going to be wind.
We've got our game day edition of Rapid Fire coming up here in a few minutes. First, though, we're going to get more on the Clemson side of things. I talked with Ryan Kantor from TigerNet.com. And so let's get the Clemson a little bit more in detail. A little Clemson right now. We've got Ryan Kantor with us from TigerNet.com. How you doing today, Ryan?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate you doing this. I guess let's start off with this because Marcus Freeman, Dabo Swinney came up in reference, first-year head coach Marcus Freeman and kind of the start of Dabo's career. He's in his 14th full season now, which it doesn't seem to me like it's that long. I don't know about you, but, he was a first-time head coach, of course, and in his first 2 years, he was 15-12 in his first 2 full seasons. And it sounds like it wasn't a given that he might make it past then. So I'm just kind of curious, maybe sort of that early perception of Dabo Swinney and how he got the corner turned to get to the point where Clemson is right now, where they're just cooking all the time on the national scene.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't a foregone conclusion that he would get the job or that he would keep the job. They went 6-7 in 2010, lost to South Florida in the Meineke Car Care Bowl, which was in Charlotte back then. It was terrible. I didn't think they'd fire him then, but they very well could have. Back the year that they hired him, so after he was an interim, they beat South Carolina. They had a decent finish to the year, nothing spectacular, but they beat South Carolina. And I remember that's when I was a student and I was standing on the hill and they started chanting Dabo Swinney. And I just shook my head and said, oh no, we're really going to hire this guy. And I was so frustrated. And then I said, screw it. Dabo Swinney. It's over. And they didn't hire Tommy Tuberville, who I really wanted. They didn't hire Gary Patterson from TCU, who was in the mix. They were even talking to Brent Venables, which is sort of interesting now in hindsight.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and obviously they hired Swinney. And I said, if he ever can just win the division, I'll love him forever. And they very quickly won the division the very next year. And so I was in. And then they had a bad year, and then in 2010, and then after that, the program really started taking off.
Well, last year was his first 3-loss season since 2011. You just referenced that. How did last season go over there in Clemson after, again, a couple national championships, 2 more college, national championship appearances, and all the, double-digit win seasons, mostly 12 and 11 win seasons. So how did 3 losses go over last year?
Not great. It wasn't a whole lot of fun. I like to say the bitter makes the sweet sweeter, and I've definitely enjoyed it this year more than I otherwise would have in the backdrop of last season. Part of what made last season not as fun is it wasn't just they lost their games; they weren't super fun to watch. The offense was just abysmal. So even though the defense was great, they weren't exciting games. You were just kind of tense the whole time, like, if we can just get a few touchdowns, maybe we could win. But if we give up one big play, this thing could be over. So, we had been asking, or not asking for, but kind of complaining, we kill everyone, we crush everyone. It's great, but these aren't the most entertaining. And then, we're winning every game last second, these close, low-scoring games with a fumble in the red zone against, Boston College. So in that regard, it was fun, but the broader season was just really frustrating.
Sure.
Overall.
Well, of course, they lost you just mentioned Brent Venables. They lost him to Oklahoma, where, he goes back to Oklahoma, obviously. How would you compare the new defensive coordinator, Wes Goodwin's first defense, to maybe some of the top defenses that Venables had?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of to be determined. I mean, the second half against Syracuse, they looked like some of the best defenses Clemson has had. But they've been a little too up and down. The secondary was awful against Wake Forest and really needed the offense to bail them out. They sort of fell asleep in the fourth quarter at Florida State, let them come back and go for an onside kick with a chance to win the game real late. The game was mostly over, but the defense had a big lapse. So they just haven't been as dominant as maybe we expected. I felt the West was oddly slow to adjust in that Wake Forest game, leaving some cornerbacks kind of out there on an island just to get burned again and again until pretty late in the fourth quarter when they seemed to adjust. And then Wake Forest ran the ball instead of just basically just torching Clemson through the air and kind of blew it. So yeah, I would say to be determined, but I think folks are still high on Wes and optimistic of what he can do now and what he will kind of grow into.
Well, they got a new offensive coordinator as well because Tony Elliott went to Virginia. Brandon Streeter, what's kind of his popularity level, I guess, right now?
Yeah, so folks were not happy when he got promoted, to say the least. But part of it is where are the expectations, right? And the expectations for the defense are to be maybe the best in the country, right? Like right up there with Georgia, in the top 2 or 3 or 4 defenses. The offense has not been as good as the defense, but I think I and others are more impressed and pleased with Brandon Streeter than West, just because of where expectations and who they were replacing. I think a lot of people are comfortable saying that the offensive coordinator position has been upgraded. Streeter's more willing to use the tight ends. He's more willing to use tempo. He's more willing to he has more of a killer instinct. There was a play, I want to say it was against Florida State, where was it Florida State? Clemson had gotten the ball. Off a big fumble, and right away they went for the kill shot, and they did like a flea flicker with a reverse attached, and then bombed it to Jake Briningstool. Yeah, it was Florida State, and Briningstool got it in for a touchdown and kind of ended the game. And that kind of killer instinct, rather than just inside zone, maybe a screen pass.
Right.
It's more fun, and it's kind of brought the fun back. It's not just winning. We're a fun offense again. So I'm real impressed with Brandon Streeter.
Very interesting to hear that, especially when Irish fans probably around here hear that based on what they think about Tommy Rees right now. I think one of the biggest questions people around here, the question that we've got this week the most, who's going to start at quarterback? Because Cade Klubnik replaced DJ Uiagalelei in the Syracuse game, of course. DJ's number one on the depth chart that they released this week. Is there any reason to believe that he won't start this Saturday night?
No. DJ Uiagalelei is your starter for sure. Cade, he wasn't really relied upon too heavily in that game against Syracuse when he came in. He was kind of a steadying force more than anything else. I think it's pretty well established. The coaches have been almost over the top and making that point clear. So I think you'll see DJ start.
Do you think there's any chance we see both of them though?
I thought that earlier in the year, but they've really only used Klubnik in garbage time. So
yeah.
So hopefully there's garbage time, right?
Well, I guess garbage time comes in different forms, right? It's in the eye of the beholder.
That's right. But I don't think we see him unless that happens.
I mean, Uiagalelei has had a good season statistically, but the 2 interceptions against Syracuse, didn't throw any touchdown passes. How would you describe the season that he's had, especially after a full season that he had last year?
So I'll go back to kind of what I was saying before. A lot of sort of evaluation of players and coaches is based on what expectations you had for them coming in, right? Last year was a huge disappointment, right? He was a 5-star recruit who played a little bit in 2 games, was obviously amazing against Notre Dame, despite Clemson losing that. So he was a huge disappointment last year. Now we've reset expectations based on that tough year last year, and he's blown away expectations. So I think everyone's extremely happy with what he's done. He's not quite in the very, very upper, top 3 or 4. He's, not Hendon Hooker or, that very, very elite Drake May top 3 or 4 guys, but he's right there, the tier below.
Okay.
So you got to be pretty happy with what he's done this season if you're a Clemson fan.
Well, from a yardage standpoint, the 439, of course, that he had against Notre Dame 2 years ago is the best game that he's had. Is that the best game of his career to this point?
I think you might look at that Wake Forest game he had earlier. Okay. Some of those throws were pretty tough. There was one where there was literally a guy on his leg, and his leg's kind of, being pulled, and he's standing on one leg and just with his arm throws it for a touch. I think it was a 2-point conversion. That was pretty outstanding, that whole game. So I might say that was actually his best game.
Clemson's coming off a bye last week after the win over Syracuse. What's maybe the biggest thing that they needed to address during that bye week?
I think a lot of it's staying healthy. Back in 2020 when Clemson and Notre Dame split, a lot of Clemson fans were preemptively salty going into the first of the games. And I actually picked Clemson to lose that game because there were so many injuries. There was a lot of Clemson fans saying, well, this is diet Clemson. This almost doesn't count. Obviously, it counts just the same. You guys made the playoffs, so all is good. But
sure.
Clemson's pretty healthy this year. They've got Brian Brzee finally healthy after he missed games for both obviously personal reasons with his family, but also he had a kidney infection. He was coming back last season from shoulder and knee surgery. So he's healthy. Xavier Thomas is getting healthy. The defensive end, who's a great pass rusher. Sheridan Jones, who missed a bunch of games this season with the Stingers, Clemson's best cornerback. And he's back. Andrew Makuba had an elbow issue, and he's been wearing a brace. I don't know if he's 100%, but getting that extra time helps him a lot. He was one of Clemson's best defensive players last year, and his PFF metrics this year are pretty bad. So injuries definitely been affecting him. So I think just getting healthy more than anything, and maybe giving DJ some time to reset after his only truly bad game this season.
So if you're Notre Dame, what do you think should be your biggest concern from a Notre Dame perspective facing this Clemson team coming into this game Saturday night?
Yeah, so I think Notre Dame's – they've had some real stinkers, but I think when they play well, they're a good team. But I think that the way they find success is a bad matchup for them against Clemson. If they want to run the ball and hit their tight end and run the ball some more and eat up clock, I just don't know that works against a team that has a really good front seven. And then if you're not – Wake was successful because they have great receivers and they run a dynamic offense. It's kind of says our receiver's better than your cornerback. You guys in one-on-one will win. and they did. And that's kind of the opposite of Notre Dame's system, where they're going to kind of try to push us around. So I just don't think that bodes well. I think you're going to have to really kind of zig where you're not comfortable.
I agree. And, we've seen some of that at different points this season, but the last few games have been pretty heavy with the diet of that power running game. So I think we're all kind of curious what this is going to look like Saturday. South Carolina is obviously Clemson's top rival. I'm curious. This is going to be the fourth time Notre Dame and Clemson have played since 2018 now. And like you said, in 2020, they played twice because of the ACC championship game. And it's the fifth time since 2015. So how does Notre Dame, I guess, move the needle around there as like a rival type, considering they're playing more often? And this game, I think everyone thought was going to be more of a heavyweight matchup. Notre Dame, hasn't necessarily held its own. So what do you think of it from that perspective?
Yeah, I don't really consider Notre Dame a rival in terms of like NC State. I hope they lose every game, or even Georgia Tech to a lesser extent, Florida State, kind of same thing. Like I root against them because I don't like them. Aside from the fact that, you sort of need these teams to win to pad your resume, but putting that aside, Notre Dame's not one of my top 5 least favorite teams, or probably not top 20 least favorite teams. Okay. I don't know. I mean, a lot of fans, regardless of Clemson, don't like Notre Dame because they're Notre Dame, just like people don't like the Yankees because they're the Yankees.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But I don't think it's anything special with a rivalry.
Would you like to see them play more often with this ACC, arrangement, play even more often than what they play?
Yes and no. I'd rather see us play regional rivals that I have more, not affinity, but strong feelings for or against.
Like the teams you just mentioned, basically, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that we play NC State, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, Florida State every year, and those are going to be protected moving forward, which is great. But I'd rather play teams where when I go to work, I have coworkers that went to those schools, and we can kind of, tease each other. So I'd rather play Tennessee. I'd rather play Florida. I would say Georgia because it's a great rivalry, but they tend to do well against us. But in theory, those are the teams I'd rather play than Notre Dame.
When the news broke about USC and UCLA jumping to the Big Ten over the summer, there were people who started talking about Notre Dame. Are they going to join the Big Ten? But there were also rumblings about Clemson and Florida State and the SEC. And so whether it's the SEC or anywhere else, I guess, has that talk is any legs to any of that kind of talk right now?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at the exact year, but the ACC's TV agreement, which includes a grant of right, goes on for forever, basically. So I think we're fairly locked in for a while, and I'm sure lawyers could find their way around things, but I think it would at least be pretty tough to up and leave quickly. And I think from a geography and culture standpoint, I'd hate to go to the Big Ten if I'm Clemson. Not Notre Dame's perspective, obviously different. But Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, those are great schools, but they have no relation to Clemson. You grow up going to school, you're in high school and your friend cheers for Auburn and you can tease each other, right? That's like people who grew up in South Carolina, Atlanta, Charlotte, that are Clemson fans. That's sort of our experience. I don't really want to play Minnesota. The SEC could be interesting, but I also appreciate being able to go undefeated, whereas decent schools in the SEC get beat up and forgotten very quickly. Look at Florida. So I hope that the ACC could stand together, but I expect it to potentially fall apart when Notre Dame, I think, will break its agreement with us and stop participating.
Breaking news. I don't know. I think they're pretty comfortable where they are right now for the immediate, especially after, with the expansion of the playoff going to 12 here in the near future. I think Notre Dame feels pretty good about where they are right now. But I guess we'll see. It's like I think everybody thought that USC and UCLA were comfortable where they were. So.
Yeah, well, I know they have a new NBC deal coming, so I'm assuming it's going to be enough money that they don't care to ever join the ACC. I'm not assuming it's going to be enough money that they don't want to join the Big Ten, but hopefully it is. So I hope you get a huge deal and never join the Big Ten, but we'll see.
You're siding with a lot of Notre Dame fans. Everyone is, I think, well, not everyone, but most are in that same boat. Ryan Kantor from TigerNet.com. Great stuff from you, Ryan. I appreciate you doing this, and look forward to the game Saturday night.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
Thanks. You too.
Interesting take there, Vince, from Ryan Kantor at the end about, like, I think he's in the boat, and I think I misspoke about, what I was trying to say about what Notre Dame fans do or don't think there at the end. He's in the boat of a lot of people who just assume that money is going to be the driving factor in whether or not Notre Dame joins the Big Ten. And it's, as we've talked about before, as gets talked about a lot, it's much more than just what the dollar sign is. And I talked with the Syracuse guys last week, the conversation of, do they stay in the ACC and all that kind of stuff. They've already got the expansion of the college football playoff to 12. That is a huge factor for Notre Dame. And they don't need the $100 million a year that the TV rights deal from the Big Ten. I still think if it's between 65 and 85 million, I'm just kind of throwing a ballpark out. If it's in that range, so right there, that's probably going to be good enough for Notre Dame. They've got the in with the college football playoff, and I think they're going to be fine. I find it odd that people kind of outside, the Notre Dame perspective think that it's, just going to be about the dollar sign when it comes to whether or not they're going to join up with the Big Ten or any other conference.
Well, it's, in their defense, it's hard for them to understand because it is about the dollar sign to pretty much every other school in the country. And that's just what they're used to. And Notre Dame doesn't need, they don't rely on that TV contract to keep the doors open like a lot of schools do. You know what I mean? And
the athletic department at Notre Dame is not what it is at most of these state schools.
Correct. And, for example, Vanderbilt has no business being in the SEC, but they're there for the money. You know what I mean? It doesn't,
those big paychecks.
It doesn't help them athletically to be in the SEC unless you're on the recruiting trail and they're like, hey, you could play in the SEC. Hey, and no other SEC school is going to recruit you, but we will. Other than that, they have no business being there. And you could go down the line of a lot of different schools and a lot of different conferences that rely on this money. Notre Dame doesn't. And so that's not the be all end all. And so from the outside looking in, everybody thinks they're going to go to the Big Ten because that's where the biggest money is. And that's the geographic footprint that they're in is the Big Ten.
I mean, personally, I think the only thing that's probably going to break the Notre Dame ACC relationship at this point is the survival of the ACC. As long as the ACC is able to stay intact. Now, he seems to think that Notre Dame's attachment to it maybe helps that. I think Notre Dame is perfectly fine with the relationship they have there. It's working out. They're still going to end up with their own TV contract. So I think it's much more about the other side than it is what Notre Dame potentially does or doesn't do.
Oh, absolutely. And in Notre Dame, I mean, look, if they're the only school in the country that can be in a conference and then not in a conference at the same time. And everybody's okay with it. There's a reason for that.
Right.
So yeah, they're going to be just fine.
Vince,
it's that time, isn't it?
Are you ready for game day rapid fire?
Say it.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Double fill in the blank to start you off. Double fill in the blank. Beating Clemson would mean blank for Notre Dame, but losing to Clemson would mean blank for the Fighting Irish.
I think you could put in means a lot in either one of those blanks. And I think it's going to mean a lot for them to win because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't think that they're going to win. And it's, that would be huge on the national level. So I think it means a lot more nationally for Notre Dame to win this game. If they lose the game, everybody expects it, but it's still going to mean a lot because as Notre Dame fans, it's like, wow, we laid another egg in a big game. So I think it means a lot either way, to be honest with you. And I'm still on the fence about which way I'm going to go with this game, but it's going to mean a lot no matter what happens. I just don't feel like you can be okay with a close loss in this one. And if you're Notre Dame,
it would mean a huge feather in the cap for Marcus Freeman in this first year, because again, with, all this up and down that they've had, especially at home, and it would be a win over a top 5 team. The only other win they've got over a top 5 team in the last several years is 2 years ago with Clemson. and this is a team that currently sits at number 4 in the college football playoff rankings. It's also going to get you back in the rankings. They win this game,
Oh yeah,
they'll be ranked next week. If they lose this game, they will not be ranked again for the rest of this season.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I don't see a path to that. And they've got a chance to start creeping back up those rankings once again. So, and I think that's important for where this team has been with all the ups and downs that they've had, to be able to get back in the rankings late in the season. Because this is also a team that's had a program that's had a lot of success in the month of November over the last few years.
right.
And, this is a November game. How you finish the season is very important. And to start this home stretch, if they could get a win tonight over a number 4, top 5 ranked team, it would be very important for both Marcus Freeman and this program to close out the regular season.
When we had that talk in the last show that you and I did together on Wednesday about, if they beat Clemson and USC, is this season a success, right? We had that conversation.
Right.
And I'm adamant that it does not make it a success, but it does leave you at the latter half of the season in a good place going into the offseason, right? And moving forward in the future, you can be like, hey, yeah, they dropped some games early on, but man, they turned it around and they really finished strong. And going into the 23 season, where a lot of people think that Notre Dame has a good opportunity to make some noise, you've got a lot of momentum going into the offseason and into recruiting and all of those different things. And so winning this game is still huge. It's still huge, but it doesn't make your season a success, but it can make the tail end of your season a success.
Yep, concur. Isaiah Foskey needs 1.5 sacks to tie Justin Tuck for Notre Dame's all-time record of 24.5. Do you buy or sell him getting it today?
I'm going to sell it only because I think Clemson is well coached, and I think they're going to do whatever they have to do to make sure that Foskey doesn't beat them. Okay. When you're an offensive coordinator, you look at the other teams like, okay, which kid can we make not beat us? I think Foskey is one of those guys, right? I don't think they're going to allow him to beat them. Now, if he has a great game and he ends up with a couple sacks, that'd be awesome. But I'm going to sell it because I do think that Notre Dame will sack them more than once. They will get Clemson on the ground more than once. I just don't think they're all going to come from Isaiah Foskey.
Yeah, I'm going to sell it as well because it has been, the sacks at times have been hard for him to come by this season. He's had more in the last couple of weeks. And by the way, I tweeted this during the game. There was that sack that I think Howard Cross was a part of, where Justin Tuck was not initially credited.
He's underneath
part of the sack. That's right. He was down around the ankles. He was the first guy there. The Syracuse stat crew didn't initially give him half a sack, but he was credited with half a sack later afterwards after they went back to the film. So I don't think he gets it either. I think if Uiagalelei goes to the ground, he'll be part of at least one sack tonight, but I don't think he gets the full 1.5 that he needs, which probably means, unless Navy is in catch-up mode at the end of next week, might be Phil Jerkovic in a couple of weeks where he gets the record on senior day.
I'll take that one. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame has won 26 consecutive regular season games against ACC opponents entering today's game.
Kind of surprising, to be honest with you. But then when you sit down and think about it, the ACC's kind of been weakish. You talk about the soft ACC schedule that Clemson gets to play, et cetera, and then that's accurate. Notre Dame gets to play the same schedule, except for when they play Clemson, and then they got Clemson at home 2 years ago when they were undermanned, and so they were able to win that game. So it's a little bit surprising, but then not so surprising. So, okay, that's great. I hope it goes to 27.
Yeah, and it's you remember Mac Brown, after the North Carolina game when Notre Dame dismantled North Carolina, and he was like, this is one of the premier elite recruiting teams in the nation and all that kind of stuff. And it seemed like, he was trying, kind of like a Lou Holtz. He was trying to fluff up Notre Dame a little bit to justify the loss.
Only loss too, so.
But then that's their only loss right now. And like Stymie says, it's to be expected. But, what's, I guess, more impressive is the fact that I think maybe it's something that gets taken for granted, but you are playing teams from a Power 5 conference in these ACC games, and you're playing at least 5 of them, sometimes even 6 in a given season. And Clemson is part of this streak as well. So maybe it is to be expected, but it is also impressive at the same time that you've got this kind of arrangement, and there are some harder feelings from the other side because of kind of like what we
Sure.
were talking about with Ryan Kantor from, the Clemson guy a minute ago. Like there are some people on the other side of this arrangement, as much as Notre Dame means for the ACC, like these ACC schools do get up for Notre Dame, but Notre Dame has been able to take care of its business for 26 games in a row.
You can say it's to be expected, but there's a pretty large majority of people that did not expect Notre Dame to win the last time Clemson came to town.
Right. It was the number one team in the country.
Yes, Notre Dame had some advantages in the fact that Trevor Lawrence didn't play, and I think 2 or 3 defensive players didn't play. I get that. People still didn't think Notre Dame was going to win, so I can't say it's to be expected. It's to be expected if you're talking about ACC teams other than Clemson.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why this question is relevant today, because they play Clemson today, and
right.
It's not expected that Notre Dame is going to win this game.
Right.
So it's not to be expected, but at the same time, it is for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, you were probably favored in most of those games, with the exception of Clemson, just like today.
Correct.
I do find it interesting that I think the line was something like 3.5 points only,
That's
in
nuts.
Clemson's favor in this game.
That's nuts. And
I know
they ended up not being favored in the Syracuse game last week. And there's been a couple of games, I think, this year. I think they were favored against North Carolina. But either way, you're right. The vast majority of the games, Notre Dame is favored to win those games.
Right. So Notre Dame has blocked 5 punts, of course, this season. Clemson has 4 block kicks as well. They're both in the top 4 in the nation in terms of blocking kicks this season. Here's what Marcus Freeman had to say this week about facing another team that blocks those kicks on the regular.
You just want to make sure your protection's solid, and each week we're always a protect first team, no matter if it's punt or kicking a field goal, you have to protect first, and then obviously cover if it's a punt kick. And then if it's a long field goal, you got to be ready to cover too. So, just it's about being sound, playing sound football and protecting your kicker and making sure your protection is right. And so it comes down to scheme and fundamentals and execution. So that's really it.
That, of course, is Marcus Freeman from his Thursday Zoom. And before we get to the response, but, Salty says, could he have sounded any more bored? He the whole press conference Thursday, he looked like either he was kind of having a mood that day. A lot of it, his responses sounded like that. Kind of having a mood, or maybe just a little bit under the weather. I don't know. One of the two. But that was kind of how Thursday went for Marcus Freeman. Go ahead, Vince.
In his defense, doing 2 press conferences a week, plus game day, plus everything else. I mean, we're in the thick of the season at this point. I give him a little bit of a pass for not being super excited about it.
And this is a big home game this week, too,
Right.
So
a lot of pressure today. So I give him a little bit of a pass on this one. I mean, it's also a Zoom press conference. So he's in his office, talking to a laptop.
And like when I used to do pregame interviews with Muffet McGraw, you could always tell, like she was always, wound up when it got close to game time anyway. But you could also always tell, like when it was UConn or a big game, like a tournament, like coaches get a little bit wound tighter. And so that's maybe that's how I read into it. It's like you've got a big game and it's a home game and a big opportunity this Saturday.
Yes.
But in terms of the block kicks, what's it all mean for today, Vince?
Well, it means that special teams are going to be a really important part of this game. I mean, that's what it means. Whether Notre Dame prevents them from blocking a kick, or Notre Dame gets out and blocks a kick of theirs, or, flips the field in an important moment, or whatever the case may be. Special teams on both sides is going to be really, really important. And I think it's going to be one of the storylines of today's game.
Yeah, exactly. Special teams is going to be very important tonight, and Notre Dame is going to need to make a couple of special teams plays to be able to win the night. Whether it's block kicks, they've obviously got to protect against those blocks as well. Notre Dame tied for number 1 in the nation. Clemson is tied for number 4 in the nation with those block kicks. So you have to be particularly on guard when it comes to protections. I'm sure Brian Mason has been scouring all the films, to make sure that there are no tells. Or
I think we're going to see something fun today. That's what I'll say. I have no inside information whatsoever. I just have a lot of faith in Brian Mason. So I think we're going to see something fun on special teams today.
I do too. Which quarterback is going to have more total touchdowns tonight? Notre Dame's Drew Pine, or the man with more vowels in his name, DJ Uiagalelei?
That's a good question. And I read this the first time with who's going to have more touchdown passes. And I don't know why, because the word
Total
passes
touchdowns.
is not in the
Yeah.
question in any way.
See, you always do that. That's why you have to
know.
read.
Well, I
gotta
read
the
it.
fine
I
print.
just didn't read it very closely. And that's on me. This one's tough because, DJ does get into the end zone with his feet. I mean, he's got 4 on the ground, right? And he's got a bunch through the air. I'm going to say DJ on this one. I think the Notre Dame run game is going to be really good. I think they're going to have an opportunity to put, points on the board in that direction. But Drew's going to have to put it in the end zone. I just think that DJ is going to have more.
I think so too, because of the fact, especially once you get in the red zone, he is more of a threat from the red zone to run it. And it, like against Syracuse a couple of weeks ago, he didn't go any touchdown passes. Now he didn't, he came out of the game for Cade Klubnik. And I'll be curious to see how, if Notre Dame is able to disrupt Uiagalelei, if Clemson decides to make a move like that later in the game or, at some point in the game. But I'm going to go with Uiagalelei with more total touchdowns tonight than Drew Pine because of Notre Dame's running game and the way that is such a factor.
Yep. I don't like it, but I will agree with you.
Salty says you're predicting a close loss right now. Over under 150 rushing yards for the Irish tonight.
If anything goes right for Notre Dame, I think it's going to be the run game. And I do think that total rush yards, they will get over 150. I think they will have success on the ground, regardless of the defensive line that Clemson is bringing. I think that they're whether we want to see it or not, they're going to pound the rock. And I think they will end up with over 150.
Clemson's only given up over 150 once this season, and they gave up over 200 to Florida State, interestingly enough. And, of course, Notre Dame is on this roll of all these 200-plus yard games. I don't know that they get to 200, but if it is going to be any kind of game tonight, and I think it will at least be a competitive game, Notre Dame is going to have to top 150 rushing yards.
Yes.
Again, if nothing else, between the wind, taking pressure off Drew Pine, the run game has to support it, but you also have to be more dimensional than just pounding that straight forward between the tackles. But this is a game, like we talk about Marcus Freeman, but with all the heat that Tommy Rees has taken this year, this is a game that is going to be very telling for Notre Dame's offensive coordinator tonight. I do think Notre Dame will get over, but I think it's going to be very telling for Tommy Rees tonight.
I completely agree with you.
Fill in the blank. The Notre Dame running back who will top 100 yards from scrimmage tonight is blank.
Wow, this is look, if Notre Dame wins the game, it's Chris Tyree. If they lose the game, the answer is no one.
Completely agree with that. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. I don't know what else to say about that. That is exactly it. And, if Notre Dame is in a situation where they are leading, maybe it becomes Audric Estime for the way
he's just pounding it and running the clock.
Sledgehammer at the end of the game. Yeah, but I think it's got to be Chris Tyree. I think he's the one who's got the most realistic shot to get it. Again, it comes down to Tommy Rees and how he chooses to employ that particular weapon, because Chris Tyree has to be like weapon X in tonight's game.
No doubt about it. He has to be. And any big game like this, there has to be an X factor, right? Chris Tyree is that offensive X factor to me. You can say what you want to about the quarterback play and how that goes and all of that. And I completely agree with that. But if there's an X factor, there has to be somebody maybe that you're not expecting, or maybe something that the other team wasn't expecting. It has to be Chris Tyree. He is the X factor in this game.
Yep, I completely agree with that. What's your prediction for tonight's game before we get into our national predictions on today's show?
Boy, I tell you what, Sean, this one hurt to do. And so obviously people know which way I'm going. And it wouldn't surprise me if Notre Dame blows out Clemson. It wouldn't surprise me if Clemson blows out Notre Dame. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's a close game. I have zero expectations going into this game because there are so many different variables that need to go one way or the other for the game to be either way, right? So that's what's really hard for me. And I've said it a bunch this week. I think every position group is ready for this game. They've shown me that they can play at the level that they need to win this game, except quarterback, at least recently. I need to have an average Drew Pine. And I'm not sure that we're going to get that because the last few games, the last 2 or 3 games have not been that. Yep. I hope I'm wrong. I can't even tell you how much I hope I'm wrong. I will come into the post-game show looking for absolution from Father David Penny. I will do a confession right here on the show, but I do have Notre Dame losing 24-28 to Clemson today.
Vince, I think you're showing growth, my friend. I think you're showing growth, that you're not just rubber stamping a Notre Dame win because you want it to happen. Like you're seeing, some realistic, other possibilities out there. So I know it has to hurt you. Is there a path for Notre Dame to win tonight? Of course there is, but it's hard to see, all the stars really line up in Notre Dame's favor tonight, because Clemson's defense can be beat deep, but its strength is up front. That's where Notre Dame's strength, of course, is in running the ball. Again, there's going to be so much on Tommy Rees tonight in how he chooses to try to attack this Clemson defense. Notre Dame's defense can keep Uiagalelei and company in check, but the Irish are going to need at least a couple of game-changing plays from the defense and or special teams. Again, as I've said the whole show, all three phases have to be a factor tonight. And, Syracuse is really the first time that that's happened in a game all season, and again, like, you look at the home and away success, you look at their success against top 5 teams, and with Drew Pine, with his emotions, such a big part of his game as well, like, is he going to be too hyped coming into tonight's game? I think that can be a factor as well. But, again, part of that has to be on Tommy Rees figuring out a way to get him settled into the game, make some early plays, get his confidence going in the right direction so that he doesn't start to press and let his emotions get the best of him.
That's a really good point, because I think Drew Pine's emotions and leadership and all of that can be really, really good for this team, but it also can be a detriment to this team, right? From his play standpoint. And so, yeah, I think that's a really, really good point that I did not think about, for sure.
Yeah. Savage said, I guess this is in reference to the all three phases. He says, North Carolina, I still feel like that was more about the offense dominating. Like, you didn't see like big, you definitely didn't see turnovers caused by the defense, for example. And that's what I'm talking about. Like I'm talking about with the 2 turnovers, specifically the Brandon Joseph interception to start to get you like those kind of tight
turnovers. Yeah.
Plays.
You're going to need them. You're going to need turnovers in a game like this.
Yeah. But I've got Clemson winning a close one, 24-17 tonight. Again, I think Notre Dame can win.
Oh, yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me in any way if Notre Dame goes out and wins this game.
Yeah. Like, this is like the kind of game where, like, if you see that, if they actually do win this game, then maybe that'll change my thought process going forward. Sure. All right, let's do the national games. We've got number 1 Tennessee at 3rd ranked Georgia. Go.
Oh boy, I'll tell you what, Sean. This is I might be out tailgating. I might be watching. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see what happens, and we'll have information on the tailgate here in just a second, everybody. But number 1 versus number 3, I think this game is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think this game, even though Georgia's defense is what it is, I think this game is going to be a shootout, personally. I think that both teams are going to put a bunch of points on the board. I think Tennessee wins this one. I think this might be Tennessee's year. I think this is big for a lot of reasons, obviously. Does Tennessee belong? Number 1, this is Georgia's real first big test of the season as the reigning national champion. Are they still that, right? We're going to get a lot of things answered. It's at Georgia. That obviously gives Georgia a bit of a leg up. But I still think Tennessee's going to win. I've got them winning 38-35. Field goal game.
Stymie, I love the Vols plus 8.5. I would pound that all day long in terms of the actual outcome of the game. I mean, it's Georgia's number 1 defense in the SEC, Tennessee's number 1 offense. Georgia's really only been tested once this season, and that was in that close 26-22 win at Missouri, of all teams. And Tennessee's already beaten Alabama, who is then number 3, and now the Vols are going to try to hand Georgia its first regular season loss in 2 full calendar years. I do like Tennessee in this one, in a game that should be plenty entertaining. That offense and Hendon Hooker, I've got the Vols winning 31-27.
Okay, another close one, just like me. All right.
Now, number 6 Alabama at number 10 LSU.
Now, it's a crying shame that this game is on at the same time as the Notre Dame game, but I'll be keeping an eye on it. Maybe from a score standpoint, maybe I'll have my iPad up. I don't know, but I will be keeping an eye on this game. This game should be a lot of fun since it's 7:00. Obviously, it's on ESPN. But, the fact that LSU is number 10, I think is a farce. I think it's ridiculous. Nick Saban obviously has the advantage over Brian Kelly from a coaching standpoint. He just does. He just has Brian Kelly's number. Will that have anything to do with this? I mean, it's a different team for Brian Kelly. It's at home for LSU, which is huge. I just don't see this game being close. I think Alabama comes out and just whoops LSU. I think it's 41-21 is what I've got.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly's had a chance to beat a top 10 team at home this season, but they got their doors blown off by Tennessee 40-13. And, again, BK's got him in the top 10. I don't think it's going to last long. The way to beat Alabama is to throw deep, but LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels, he's more a dink and dunk type guy than throw it deep. So I've got Alabama winning 37-20. Down in Baton Rouge.
17 points. I got like 20. So, I mean, we're in the same neighborhood.
Yep.
I just think the Alabama defense is going to pin their ears back and just make LSU's life a living you-know-what. And it's going to be, well, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's going to be fun to watch.
Yep. Then we've got number 24 Texas at number 13 Kansas State.
Also a 7 o'clock kick on FS1. So if you get Fox Sports 1, then you get to watch this game. But you're not going to be watching this game because you're going to be watching Notre Dame and Clemson. But look, again, if we're talking about, teams that don't belong in the top 25, Texas fits that bill pretty easily. They're a 3-loss team. Yes, their losses have been by, small margins or whatever, but they still have 3 losses. And they don't belong in the top 25. And if that tells you about anywhere where I'm going with this game, it's at Kansas State. I think that's big as well. I think it's a 10-point game. I think Kansas State wins this thing 45-35.
Yeah, I mean, this game to me almost a toss-up. They do have a common opponent for each of them the last couple of weeks. Texas lost to Oklahoma State 41-34 2 weeks ago, and then Kansas State just beat that same Cowboy team 48-0 last week, and that was without Adrian Martinez. I was just shocked by that score. I had Oklahoma State winning that game. But I've got Kansas State winning 38-34 today.
Oh, close one. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, last game, number 21 Wake Forest at 22nd ranked NC State.
Yet another night game, 8 o'clock on the ACC network. Oof. I know the night games are heavy and they are hot. But, I'll tell you what, man, Wake Forest and Sam Hartman just looked terrible last week against Louisville. I think he had 5 turnovers by himself when you count interceptions and fumbles. I don't see him doing that again. I mean, that seems like a once a year sort of a situation, but I mean, it snowballed fast for Wake Forest. But I still like, again, it's 21 versus 22. NC State is at home. I've got NC State winning a close one here, 21-20 over Wake Forest.
I just like Wake Forest's offense too much. I think that's going to end up winning the day. I've got a bit more high-scoring game than you, 34-24 Wake over NC State.
Just don't like that slow mesh, man. I don't like that slow mesh. If you can attack it, you're going to be in good shape.
Yeah.
We'll see. Hey, you want my upset pick, Sean?
Let's do it.
Got the Jayhawks. The Jayhawks over
Rock
Oklahoma State, baby. So I'm on board. I'm on board with the Jayhawks.
I hope. Got to snap this losing streak. Got to break out of the funk and get back on the winning track, get bowl eligible here.
And that's a pick'em game for some reason. It's a pick'em game, Sean.
That's what I've been looking at that all week, and yeah, it's been sitting on pick'em all week. It has not moved.
Yeah.
Much, so
crazy.
Yeah, which basically means you're just picking money line. So.
Yeah. Yep.
My upset, I've got Washington over Oregon State tonight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I like that. Huskies over the Beavers. All right, I'll take
By the way, I called Missouri against South Carolina last week. I couldn't remember it at the end of the show, but Missouri did beat South Carolina last week. So
very nice.
Once again, our upset picks not reflected in our overall standings for the season.
Which is why we're all losing to Brian.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right, well, that's going to do it. Any update on where the tailgate is going to be?
So because of the wind advisory and the non-allowance of the canopies and whatnot,
no tents and stuff,
it is going to be later. I was told, here's the exact text that Brian sent me. Let people know we're pushing back the start time of the tailgate. Follow me on Twitter and check out the boards for updates.
Okay.
So get on the board. He'll update there. Get Twitter. Check it out there. You don't even need to have Twitter to follow to find him on Twitter and see what he's got to say. So that's where we're at. So there will be a tailgate. I'll be out there at some point. I don't know. Sean, are you going to stop by?
Stymie says Notre Dame is his upset pick. Well, if we ever find out where it is, I will before
there you go.
I go in. So somebody have a cold Yingling for me out there. If you're out there at the tailgate, let me know where it is, and I will stop by.
There you go.
For a Yingling. So as long as there is an icy cold Yingling on the line, I will do it. So
I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
That's my condition.
All right, fair enough.
All right, well, that is going to do it for us today. Don't forget, post-game show late night tonight. Brian, Vince, Jesse, and the gang will be there. I think Ryan is going to be there as well for the post-game show later tonight. So looking forward to that.
Yep,
all right.
Wee hours of the night. We might actually see the time change tonight, which will be
that's true. Forgot about that. It is fallback time.
It is
tonight. All right. All right, Vince, I will see you later. Everybody else, thanks for stopping by as always. Don't forget, IB Nation Sports Talk is Monday, so we've got that Monday through Thursday. And, of course, this show will be back next week. We will talk to you later. IB Countdown to Kickoff.